taking the time out of your day to speak with us all. And we're definitely really excited to hear about your experiences in the field and just get some tips and advice. But Michael is actually a Kean alumni. He was actually the president of PRSSA 2 years ago. And he had a really great time putting together his campaign. We haven't been able to put together a great campaign this year with our small group and being virtual. So we're trying to make do and do the most that we can as a chapter. So speaking with you guys is absolutely an honor for us to get this opportunity. If you guys want to introduce yourselves before we get started, that would be great.
Go ahead, Mike.
Cool. Yeah, I'll jump in. Like I said through email, I'm Michael Canova, but I went to Kean. I graduated, I think 2017. It's been a while, I guess, but yeah, I was a PR major, communications major. I was a part of the PRSSA for 3 years. I became president the latter 2 years. But yeah, I enjoyed my time at Kean and working on campaigns for the PRSSA and just getting my toes wet in the field. So it's been an experience, and now I'm at FischTank now for almost 2 years. This is my first full-time PR job, and I've been really enjoying it, learning a lot. Getting familiar with the industries and the PR folks and kind of how everything runs in the PR world. So it's been a joy.
And when Mike says it's his first PR job, it's also his last because he's not allowed to leave yet. I'm Matt Bretzius. I'm president and partner at FischTank. I've been there basically since the beginning. I'm also a journalist by trade is really what my background is. And then I transitioned into PR 4 or 5 years into my journalism career. I was never a part of a PRSSA because I'm not sure they had one where I went to school when I was at school. So I'm not sure I had access to a group like this, but probably would have benefited from it had it been there. So looking forward to talking to everybody today and answering some questions.
Thank you, gentlemen, both. We appreciate it. Professor Sullivan, the advisor of the PRSSA, and Matt, as I'm sure you do there at FischTank, when students come to us and express an interest in getting involved, we kind of give them the keys and say, drive the car, and when you need help steering it, let us know. And I'm glad to hear that Michael's doing well there and representing our program well. He was an excellent president. We've been very lucky to have him for as long as we did. And more importantly, we've had a lot of strong presidents in his wake take the helm and steer us. Karen's another great president. She's doing it in this pandemic-ridden kind of remote process. So we always, Karen, give you credit for that. Michael, I know that it sounds like you've been away for a while, but I'm sure you look back and there are some good memories. Those campaigns are one of them, and I think one of the strong points was certainly working with Trinitas Hospital. That was a really strong campaign. Yep. And we always try to strive to catch up to those results that your tenure was able to pull off. So always kudos to you, good sir. Karen, do you want to start off with one of the first questions we have from our chapter?
Sure. And I mean, this can go more towards Matt, but Michael, you could definitely answer this too from like an employee perspective. What are the qualities that you guys look when you're hiring somebody first out of college? And from Michael's perspective, when you're like meeting a new employee or somebody they're thinking about hiring, what are qualities that you're looking for and qualities that you're not looking for either?
I mean, I think one of the most important things when you're coming out of college, and whether you've had internship experience or not, is just like an anxiousness and an excitedness to like learn subject matter and to want to jump in feet first and get your hands dirty, right? This is an industry where it's not necessarily for the shy, like you're working with reporters, you're working with clients, you're working with colleagues from day one. And a lot of times you're working on subject matter that maybe is unfamiliar to you. So just coming in and having like an attitude that you're just kind of ready to like take on the day, willing to learn, willing to do some things that maybe like are a little bit uncomfortable for you, I think is a great asset to have when you're entering this industry, because like PR will make you uncomfortable at times. You'll have to talk about some things or do some things that maybe aren't within your personality or nature, but it's all for the betterment. So that's definitely one thing. I think another thing that's a great quality for somebody is just having a general awareness of how news works, right? Like, what's a news cycle? Why are reporters covering what they're covering? Who are the audiences that these specific reporters are covering? And then how are they pushing their news out? It's so different now compared to what it was even 5 years ago, but 10 or 15 years ago, like when I came out of college, their Twitter was, I don't even know if it existed, and if it did, it was in its infancy. Right now, everyone's putting their news out on Twitter before it's even being published on their respective sites. So having like a bit of an understanding of how that ecosystem works also kind of gives you like a little bit of a leg up when you enter the workforce, because you already start to know where to look, right? And how to follow journalists and see where they're publishing their news. So I'd say those are two things that that we certainly look for. Stuff that we don't look for, and that's hard to say. We're pretty obviously like open-minded. I would say maybe the only thing we don't look for is somebody who like doesn't have a background in PR or journalism, right? But as long as you have sort of that background and that interest, I think we can make anything work. We've hired people with all sorts of backgrounds, journalists, people who have come to us without any internship experience, just out of college. Mike was one of those folks. We've hired people who do have internships. We've hired people who have come from different industries. So again, just having sort of the mind to be able to attack the day and a basic understanding of how the news works is certainly a benefit. Mike, if you want to answer from your perspective.
Yeah, I could jump in. Just from kind of entry level position where I started from, you want to look for obviously a company that has growth, a opportunity to grow, where you could start. I was able to come in and I didn't have the internship experience, but I was able to come in and learn the industry, but also there was growth in the company. The company was growing, and that's what something you look for, so you could see yourself obviously growing with the company. That's always exciting. I mean, away from kind of the PR work, I think you want a fun cultured group of people. You want a lot of people you could relate to and be around outside of work, which makes working with them a lot easier. But I think the internship aspect, if you have internship experience, it'll transition well. But yeah, that's pretty much kind of what I look for.
And Karen, do you mind if I just jump in on a side point? I'm just noticing, Matt and Michael go back and forth here. Michael, I don't want to speak for you or divulge too much, but I do remember Matt working with Michael after he graduated to kind of keep that flame lit and long enough to find that opportunity. And I noticed you had talked about what you look for in a candidate, and not so much, Michael as an individual, but I think seeing that eventual persistence pay off, and being able to talk to him afterwards when he realized he found a place that he was comfortable enough to call home, much like, Kean University had been before that for him. I'm just wondering, when you look towards that next wave of hiring now in a pandemic and may take, new employees a little time to find their footing, any tips for sticking it out the long haul to hopefully come to that fruitful end?
Yeah, I mean, it's PR, this industry by nature, you're going to fail in it, right? Like I make this analogy all the time. If there's like people who like sports references, right? Like in baseball, to get to the Hall of Fame, you hit 300, but that means 70% of the time you failed, right? Like this industry is very similar, especially when it's media relations heavy. Is you could be reaching out to 100 reporters a week and hearing back from 2, right? But if you hear from those 2, that could turn into an impactful story that changes the trajectory of your client's business. So like the mental makeup of just knowing that, like, yes, it's hard, it's going to be a challenge, but that you can get there. Like that's what's really important. And I mean, I can speak to Mike specifically, like when Mike came through the process, he went through a little bit of the same thing even I did when I transitioned to PRs. there were a lot of PR agencies that would not hire me because I didn't work at a PR agency previously, even though I was a journalist, right? I finally moved up here and I did get a job there. You know, and Mike had a similar situation where he didn't have an internship, so some people were turning him away. But Mike was determined, and in his interview with us, you know, he just expressed that all he needs is somebody to give him the opportunity because he's going to work his butt off, right? And he's going to make it worth it, and he's going to understand he's going to succeed. And that's ultimately what happened. And that's a credit to his attitude toward it. So, yes, it is challenging now because of COVID, because we're all remote. Everyone's onboarding, you know, in their living rooms, which makes things not as easy. But ultimately, like if you find yourself in the right spot and you have the right attitude toward it, you fight through it.
I appreciate that, Matt. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, you just have to know that like some days, like it's not going to go how you want it to go.
That's
You know
very,
what I mean?
that's very true.
Like, that's life.
Yeah.
But there's always the next day. So
And that's also life in remote
sure.
work / pandemic world, right? Where you've got
100%.
the tinfoil trying to get the Wi-Fi to work just right.
Definitely.
Karen, another question you had there?
Yeah. Back to like the interviewing stuff. What would be something to just avoid, or is there something that somebody's ever said during an interview that just, you know, rubs you the wrong way? What are things that you want to totally avoid talking about and mentioning during the interview process?
I would generally recommend avoiding like telling someone who's interviewing you like what you don't like to do, or you know, like a part of the role maybe that like you don't love. We've had people who have done that, and I mean it's certainly not ideal if obviously in the role like stated things are in there that you would be responsible for, and then you come into the interview and sort of express that it's not something you're super into. I would say the other thing is honestly, and this is hard to tell whether people do it or not, but one thing not to do is like, just don't be dishonest about your qualifications, what you're comfortable with, what your background and what your experience are, because you'll be found out like pretty quickly in this space. Like if you say you've done something or you understand something and then you get put into a role and you don't, right?
Yep.
I would much rather a candidate, if I say like, hey, have you ever used Hootsuite before for social media posting? And they say like, no, but I like would love to learn, you know, like I really love social media, et cetera, et cetera. I would take that 10 out of 10 than somebody that's like, oh yeah, I use it every day. And then they get here and they just don't know, right? So just don't misrepresent yourself. At the end of the day, coming out of college and getting your first job, you're not going to be expected to be an expert in this space, right? What people are going to be looking for from you in an interview is enthusiasm, some basic level of knowledge of like what you're trying to do, whether it's digital or PR, et cetera, and a willingness to learn. And that's plenty to get you through.
Karen, you keep creating really good segues. One of the questions I was thinking of listening to that is timing, I guess. Either Matt or even Mike, you could speak to, I guess, when you started. I know when I was a senior in college way back when, I had an internship that was going to become a job, and then the economy was a little shaky and that fell through. And I think I remember starting maybe somewhere in March, April-ish, looking for that first job. I don't know if that's still a good timeline, or if you guys are expecting people to start even earlier. Any ideas on it for our seniors when to start that next step in the right direction?
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely answer this. So it's tough because you have people last year who graduated right when this all started, who may still be looking for jobs. I love like the enthusiasm of someone reaching out to me in like February and saying like, hey, I'm graduating in May. Like, I'd love to have an interview with you. But for us, it's challenging to then say to them like, sure, we can hire you now for May, because we don't know what's going to happen in the next 3 or 4 months, right? So, I mean, I would say maybe within like 6 weeks of graduation, a month of graduation, you know, to start hitting the pavement and seeing what's out there. I think it's hard for a lot of people to make hiring decisions 2 or 3 months in advance. And I think it's also, you risk if you go out too early, you know, in like a January or February, of being sort of like buried if, you know, they say like, hey, reach back out to us in May, and then they file you away, and then, you know, they may just never find you again. So I do think though, there is something positive to making those connections early on, even if it's not asking for an interview, but just saying like, hey, I'm a graduating senior, I'll be graduating in May. I'd love to set up some time to talk to you about, you know, when you may be hiring entry-level positions, et cetera, et cetera. I've done that with people who have reached out to me personally. You know, then we've gone back and we've interviewed them or talked to them later. So I don't think there's a science to it.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, like that's what I did with Eric, Matt. I don't know if you remember, but I spoke to Eric about a year before I got interviewed at FischTank. But yeah, just putting yourself in front of, you know, a bunch of employers, I think, just to talk to them and kind of pick their brain like this, and you know, seeing what the industry's about and the hiring process. I think that's beneficial. And then honestly, you use it in the PR field as well. You get in front of a journalist and just tell them a few ideas, or just, you know, talk something over, you know, virtual coffee now, but coffee in person when everything's back to normal. But yeah, if you do that, and you tell them about your clients and what your clients do, and set up more conversations in the future, it only could benefit you. And I think it kind of goes hand in hand with applying for jobs as well as kind of our industry and field.
Gentlemen, we also have Alyssa joining us as well now. Alyssa and Christina are also members of our board this year, so happy to have them both here as well. And Siobhan's here too. Alyssa, I know you just joined us. We're going to record this conversation today, and if there's any questions anybody wants to shout out to our guests, feel free to do it as we go. Karen, I guess I'll toss it back to you unless there's somebody else who has a question they want to chime in with.
Yeah, I wanted to just ask, does FischTank offer an internship program, or do you guys offer internships in the summer, or how do you guys do internship opportunities?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we do take interns. I'd say we're probably like formalizing the process now a little more than we had previously. We're going to have 2 interns, I think, in the spring. A lot of times they have come directly from like my personal network or my partner Eric's personal network. This year we've had someone who was introduced to us through one of our team members. So, you know, we're always open to interns. We do it for either if they need credit hours. I mean, we also pay just because interns should be paid. And then generally we try and offer basically the same sort of like work experience you would get as if you were, you know, like an account executive. Oh, my camera's dying. An account executive, sorry about that. So that you're getting to really like jump in and do a little bit of everything. You know, it's not, our interns aren't like getting coffee and mailing letters. You know, they're doing media research, they're building media lists, they're pitching journalists toward the end of it. You know, they're highly involved.
I have a question. Hi,
Yeah.
Christina here. So when do you guys think is a good time for college students to, you know, like do that heavy duty job search? Before or after, during, every day?
Before, after like an internship, you mean?
Like an internship, or just in general, like they're, you know, seniors, juniors, getting ready, maybe more seniors, but getting ready to graduate. Like, should they be looking for internships or just jobs or both? Like,
I mean, I think
for the kills, do everything.
Sure. I mean, I think if there's an opportunity to have an internship while you're in school,
yeah,
and gain that experience like while you're in school, that is beneficial, because then obviously you have it when you're going like out into the workforce for the first time. Not everybody is fortunate enough to do that. Sometimes there aren't enough internships that exist. I'm not a believer necessarily that like you have to have an internship in order to have to get a job. There are a lot of firms that, you know, look for that type of experience, and we do too to some extent. But you know, again, Mike didn't have an internship, And we hired Mike. And 2 years later, he's still here. So, I think from a timing perspective, again, starting to look for a job, definitely as a senior, sometime in the spring, is a good time to, I think, maybe start to identify what exactly it is that you want to do in the industry, right? Because there are different things here. Our firm, like the areas we work in mostly, is technology, healthcare, and sustainability. So if you're someone who's interested in being a celebrity publicist or working with like liquor brands or like consumer products, we're probably not for you, so you can at least cut then some of that out of your job search. And I think also trying to decide or getting understanding of, do you want to work at an agency where you're working on 5 or 6 clients at a time, or do you want to go work in-house for a company where you're working on one company, your company, right? I think those are things that you can start to try and figure out, within your senior year, even within your junior year. And that's where internships also help, right? Because you can go do that stuff for 2 or 3 months at a time, work somewhere. Maybe you decide you don't really like it. You don't like consumer PR, you like technology, or you like fashion, or whatever the case may be. All that said, if you get to the end and you graduate and you're looking for a job and maybe you're not finding something, it doesn't hurt if you can do it to still try and get an internship then, right? You can get yourself still another 2 or 3 months of industry experience. You will have like verifiable clips and things to put on your resume as you're continuing to job search. And also ultimately at the end of the day, it may lead to a job anyways, because there are a lot of firms that will hire interns that have come and worked for them for a couple of months, especially if they've just graduated. Our first employee at FischTank was an intern who worked with me at a previous firm, who I brought over to FischTank with us
Nice.
right after she graduated, because she was awesome, So any short answer to a long question, any type of experience that you can get yourself is generally helpful, and any type of understanding you can have and what you want to do is generally helpful. Senior year is the time to really dig in and look for it.
Thanks.
Matt, from an instructor's perspective, I think we mentioned this in the classroom, right? I think not being on the front lines of hiring, we don't realize sometimes how much agencies and organizations may take this into account. Any comments you can give us on the review of a candidate's social media profiles and things like that?
Yeah, that's a good question. We have probably looked at social media profiles, not enough that I can even give you an amount of how many times we've done it, to be honest with you. However, I know this isn't a PR story, but when I was at West Virginia for college, coming out as a journalist, there was someone from our class who had landed like a major gig at the Washington Post. Mm-hmm. And then they did an audit and looked at that student's Facebook page and saw pictures of them like doing keg stands and stuff, and they withdrew the job. Now, that was 15 years ago when social media was like a little bit, it was new, right? The only thing that I think would really scare us off if we saw something like that was like stuff that's inflammatory.
Sure.
We know that people have lives outside of work. So, if they're having drinks with friends or at a party or whatever, like that's going to show up on their social media pages. It's not something we actively look at. I can't speak for other firms, but I would just say that like in a time like now where everything is digitally logged, like what's the saying? Like the internet doesn't forget, right? So, just something to keep in mind, I guess.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Alyssa, or do you have any questions you want to ask? I'm sorry, Karen, I'm going to speak for you.
No, it's okay. Alyssa, you can go first if you have any questions.
Yeah. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Awesome. So I'm sorry, I joined a little bit late. So if you answer this, you can just let me know. Where did it go? I just had it. I think it was like, has there been like anything that's unexpected that's come up? So like obviously PR, like things pop up every now and then, like anything that's been really unexpected, like urgent that's popped up, and like how did you help with them, or how did the employees take it?
From like a client perspective?
Yeah, you could give it from that.
Yeah, I mean, every week I think it seems like You know, we've had like your normal run of the mill where, you know, like a client says something they shouldn't on an interview, and then we have to go into scramble mode to try and it's not necessarily bad, but maybe it was like information that wasn't for public consumption. We had, I mean, I guess I can talk about this. We had a client a few years ago that we worked with that we had like vetted pretty well. And then we started getting some calls from reporters, and it turned out that they had some like very weird connections to like an Iranian arms dealer. You know, and it just like, that stuff just like surprises you, right? And then like we as a firm have to kind of figure out, you know, like how we work around something like that. So I think that also though is, and I'll let Mike jump in after this because like he's certainly dealt with some of it, is that can also be part of the exciting part of the job, in that like it does break up, you know, sometimes the monotony, even though it can be like a little bit stressful when all of a sudden you have a fire drill because, you know, again, like your client said something maybe they shouldn't have, or something in the industry pops off that you can very quickly put some commentary together for. So it keeps it interesting. Mike probably has a couple examples.
Yeah, I agree. I think it definitely, you know, surprise here and there. I think it definitely like makes it fun, makes it interesting as long as, you know, you could handle it. I think one good example is, I mean, we just started with one client a few years back, and we didn't really know how well they would do, or you know what kind of media coverage we'd get. And then like I think I pitched GQ, and we had a GQ interview for like the first time in our firm's history, and it was like, how the hell did this happen? But it was yeah, it's just kind of the fun and the pitching and outreach, and you never know what you're going to get really, you know, what reporter is going to respond to you, or what opportunity is going to arise, or you know what they're working on. It does keep it fun for sure.
I have a question. How do you prepare employees to handle the onboard process, like the first 30 days, the first 60 days, the first 90 days? And then like, what are some things that people should know before joining an agency? Like, what are the main things that you need to know?
Sure. Onboarding. So obviously it's different now, right? Because we are fully remote at this point in time, and probably will be majority remote forever. I don't know if we'll ever be like a full brick and mortar office again. So what we really try and do now with people, again, because they don't have the in-person one-to-one that you would normally get, being able to just turn to your left and talk to the person in the office, right? So a lot of the first 30 days and really the first couple of weeks is a lot of one-on-one with me or some of our other senior people here, really getting ingrained into your account teams. So, you know, for the first month, maybe a lot of your responsibilities are going to be more on the administrative side and research side, which in turn is helping you to learn your client subject matter. So like maybe you're going to be building media lists, right? So in doing that, you're learning more about what your clients do, who their target audiences are, what type of reporters would write about them, and you're building this sort of basis of knowledge about them moving forward. And then once you start to move into, you know, 60, 90 and past there, you know, you're getting more responsibilities that are added your way. You're starting to do agendas for your client calls. Maybe you're proofing documents, then you're starting to do some pitching and write some pitching. And all along the way, you know, we're trying to check in and just make sure that you feel like you're balancing your workload correctly. You know, you're not having any struggles, et cetera. So we try and keep everybody as active and engaged as possible, just to make sure that like, as they're coming along the way, you know, they're getting an understanding of both what their clients do, but also like what we do, because it's sort of like a double learning curve when you get hired somewhere for the first time, right? Is you have to not only learn your clients, but you have to learn how your company works and why they do what they do. The second part of the question was what to know when you started an agency, right? I'll even broaden it out and just say like what to know when you get a job in PR, whether agency or in-house, because I think it's important both ways. Something that is really important is understanding the process and sort of like the point of media relations and reaching out to media and those relationships between your companies and journalists and why, like the ecosystem, like why we're being hired. I teach some classes in the grad school program at Drexel in Philly, and their curriculum there is a little bit older. So they don't teach very much of like the modern side of public relations and digital and media. And there's a lot of students there who, they get in the grad school program and they've not heard of what pitching media was. So they don't know what media outreach is. And that can be challenging going to a firm, because when you go to an agency as, an entry level or a new person, that's going to be a primary part of your role. So understanding that, and like really what the relationships are between you and journalists and how that plays into your client's best interest is important. And I think, again, nowadays, because everything's so digital, just having like an understanding of social media, and why it's important to the news ecosystem. So past posting your own selfies and pictures and videos and that type of stuff, because we all know how to do that and what it's for, right? But to understand a little bit of why social media is what it is from more of a business perspective, following some of your favorite brands and seeing how they're sharing out content, I think is also helpful.
Matt, I had a question for you, just as a follow-up, Matt or Mike maybe. If a student's looking at their senior semester, right, and they've got, these 4 classes to pick from, and they can only pick one to kind of add to their skill set before they're heading off into the real world, would you counsel them to take the social media class, the media relations class, the public speaking class, or the writing class? Which one would it be if you can only have room for one?
I'm going to let Mike answer first because I want to see what he says.
Oh, Michael put you on the hot seat there.
But then I'll answer after.
All right, Matt, thank you.
I'm debating between 2, but I'll probably go with the media relations class, just because that's your everyday, and it kind of keeps everything else underneath it. You're obviously pitching, so you got to write to pitch media. You're using social for media relations as well. I'm DMing, journalists if I can't find their email. So I think media relations is kind of the umbrella, and a lot of the other stuff falls underneath it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. With one caveat, in that it also, I think, depends sort of something I said earlier, is if you have an understanding of what you want to do when you graduate or not. If you are leaning more toward the digital marketing side or corporate communication side, maybe the media relations class, not that it's not as important, but maybe social media or like a writing course is better for that situation, right? If coming out of school that you want to get a job at an agency or you want to be a publicist for somebody, the media relations course is the one for sure. I'm glad Mike said that. That was a good test.
We really put on the hot seat there, Mike. I'm glad you passed.
I passed.
We want to see you at FischTank in year 3, right? We're glad you passed. And Matt, thank you for the answer. I appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem.
I'll defer to another student on the call.
Okay, I'll go. I have one question. Now, since you said you had experience in journalism, and I hear there is a lot of controversy with getting a job from being a journalist to going to PR or switching. I know a lot of people have that struggle, but if you didn't get into PR, where do you think you would be now? Like, where do you think you would have ended up? And this could be for Michael and Matt, both of you.
So you asked, okay, I mean, I went to school because I wanted to be a sports broadcaster, like every male my age when I went to school, because it was right when ESPN started to get popular. And then I went to school and realized A, I don't love being on camera, and B, I generally don't like talking to people all that much, which is weird because now I'm on camera talking to people today. But ultimately, what kept me in the industry and the reason why I wanted to be in journalism and then ultimately went to PR is because I love storytelling. I've always loved movies, and not from necessarily the theatrical part, but because I like good stories. in journalism, you get to tell good stories. And in PR, even though you're not the one writing them, but you're still the one telling the story in some set or another. So, I mean, if I hadn't switched to the dark side, to journalism, I'm sure I'd still, or into PR, I'm sure I'd still be on the journalism side. I'm interested to see how Mike answers this, because I don't know what he wanted to do. Maybe a dancer or something.
I heard a DJ. That's what I heard. But
yeah, DJ. That's definitely true.
Yeah, I think somewhere in the entertainment industry would probably be cool. I think even if I wanted to really go all out and go to school, I'd do something maybe like physical therapy, like in the doctor world, just to, really broaden and take a lot of schooling in. But yeah, I mean, I agree with Matt. I love telling stories. I think, humans and people are just, there's so many stories out there and so many good things. So many companies are doing good things. So many people are doing good things, and to be able to tell them, to be able to, get them at the early stages, because we work with a lot of, startups and like up and coming companies. I think being able to tell those stories and kind of see them in the news after we get, media coverage, it's pretty gratifying for sure.
Does the nature of a lot of your clients being startups help or hurt the pitching process? And by that, I mean, I think, kind of post the '08 collapse, I think entrepreneurship and small business has really taken off as an appeal societally. So I'm wondering if after a while you kind of hit a logjam of using that as the angle, or if it's still something that sells.
Yeah, I mean, we actually don't work with as many startups as we used to.
Okay.
And it's not by choice. I think it helps still when it's in an area that's like ripe for disruption, So like right now, startups working in AI, in like smart sensor technology, any sort of startup within healthcare, like those are companies that media still get excited about, because the idea is that they are young and new and they're bringing something, new to the table. The flip side of it though is they're new, and it's new, and sometimes reporters think the technology or whatever doesn't have a long enough track record, right, of experience. So whether they're a startup, a company that's been around for 10 years, a company that's been around for, one of our clients has been around for like 100 years, like the oldest military nonprofit. Like at some point, you can't rely on just one messaging point anymore, and you have to sort of like reinvent the wheel. So, I think it really does vary.
Just curious. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Michael, this might be a better question for you, but I mean, Matt, maybe when you were starting up, but if you were ever like stressed out or overwhelmed with how much work you were getting, like how did you communicate that to your boss?
Yeah, I think just being at FischTank, I think the way we're set up and kind of our groups and our teams are set up, I think we're very, we keep in contact, we communicate a lot. So, if I have 2 announcements this week and, for the third client, I have to, there's a pitch going out as well, I would communicate that with, an account coordinator, someone above me who's kind of handling that. So I think just communicating, I mean, that's our major, just keeping in touch and letting them know if it's too much or, if you're overwhelmed. I think that goes a long way. And then you could also, get help if needed. So,
yeah, I mean, I think this isn't like an important topic because it's something that I think has been discussed a lot, especially since everyone's going remote, not just at FischTank, but just work in general is, especially right now, working from home, not having to commute, almost like by default, it makes it easier to work longer than you should be because you don't have to travel to get to your job, right? So it's easier to just, I'll just sign on a half hour earlier. It's important if you're overwhelmed or if your workload is such that, maybe you have too many announcements and you just can't get to everything to speak up and say something. Because ultimately, like, I'm not in touch with everything Mike does every single day because there's 20 of us, So like if 3 of his clients have major announcements and he's underwater a little bit because he's trying to deal with all three, I might not have any idea. So then I can't help him. So, you know, there oftentimes is like a little bit of a stigma about thinking you can't speak up and say that you need some help, or, you know, you're struggling to get something done, or you need an extension if possible, or someone to jump in. But ultimately, it's like way better to do that and to work through it than to not, because then A, you're miserable because you're trying to get it done and you're working super late, or B, you don't get it done, and then, you know, that's not good for the client. So now more than ever, I think it's important to try and communicate across all your teams with your workload.
I really appreciate the answer. Just from an instructor's perspective, I think a lot of students worry about that. I think another one too is, you know, getting to the point where you're having conversations with your management teams. You've gotten the job, you've been there a little while. I think some students also wonder how to have the salary conversation to make sure they're not underselling themselves or overselling. You know, to land that first job. Any ideas or tips for students who eventually will hopefully have to cross that threshold?
Sure. I think a lot of companies will sort of have, for like an entry level or new employee, almost like a set salary threshold for, you know, what that role is going to be in whatever market it's in. So, I mean, listen, we sort of subscribe by the theory of like, you don't know unless you ask, right? So like if you get offered a job and, you know, you'd like to try and get a little bit more, and you feel like your experience or some of your background is valuable enough, you know, that you can ask for that, you can certainly do it. I would say that probably more often comes in after you've already been hired and you have a performance review and you have an opportunity to show yourself to them. I think it can be tough to negotiate a little bit as an entry-level candidate. One thing my partner and Eric always say is, especially for people who work for us and it comes time to your next performance review, is, you know, force us to say no, right? Like if you come to us and you say like, hey, Matt and Eric, like this past year, like you set these goals for me and like I did this, and this, like what are we supposed to say to you? You know, all we can do is open up the checkbook because, you know, you earned it and, you know, you did what you needed to do, and, you know, we want to keep you going that way. So I guess my best advice is to just obviously work toward what your goals are, have an understanding of what the market is, you know, but don't be afraid to have the conversation, because I think more often than not, the people who are making those decisions are willing to have it with you. And at the very least, they'll give you feedback as to why or why not and what the next steps are.
And I guess, I don't know if you may know this, or this is more, you know, for the folks who handle HR at FischTank, but are there any resources that would be recommended for students to use if they're trying to, you know their worth, I guess, for lack of better words?
Yeah, I think places like sites like Glassdoor, Glassdoor.com, they do two things. One, I think employees at companies can anonymously like upload their salary numbers for certain titles to give other prospective hires like an idea of like what a similar title or experience might work there. I think they also give out reports there on like average salary numbers, like per industry, per city. So, you know, in New York, obviously, which is like major metropolitan, you're probably, as an entry-level person, going to pull a higher salary than if you're in Topeka, Kansas, right? Just because of the economics of where it is. There's another resource, and I can't think of it off the top of my head, but if a student were to just Google like average PR salary New Jersey or average PR salary New York, some of that stuff will start to pop up. Also, sites like prdaily.com, PR News, they will often put out like annual reports that share like the salary ranges for the top cities in America.
Thank
LinkedIn,
you. Appreciate that.
Yeah, LinkedIn might do it too. I think maybe you can also search on LinkedIn.
Definitely. And I just want to add to that too, just from, I guess, employee perspective. I think when you're looking for an entry-level job, you want to do your research on like the median range of the area you're looking to get into, as well as the position you're applying for. And that's really all you can do, I think, at entry level. Just make sure you're not getting, completely underpaid as an entry level employee, because, some companies out there, who knows if they take advantage for you or not. But yeah, as an employee, I think understanding, your company and kind of how your growth could be in the company. I think that's when you could realize, when it's a good time to bring up that conversation and ask and kind of review your performance for salary purposes.
How do you guys go about posting jobs? Is it usually on Indeed? Do you take direct emails from people? Because it seems like a lot of people, you have your own personal network that people send you. But do you guys prefer to get people contacting you through email, sending resumes and cover letters, or do you guys post jobs on LinkedIn or Indeed?
Sure. So we post on LinkedIn. We have used Indeed before. And we've also used recruiters sometimes. And then we have a careers page on our website where if we have an open job, we'll post it there. And if not, we still encourage people, who think that their background or work history fit to send us an email. I don't ever think there's anything wrong with sending an email to a company and saying like, hey, I didn't see any job openings on your website, but I'd love to learn if there's any career opportunities. Here's my background. Here's why I'd love to work for you, et cetera, et cetera. One of the last 3 people we hired actually did that. They reached out to us cold via email and sent us a note. And we interviewed them, and then they got a job with us, and we weren't necessarily hiring at that moment. So it is certainly possible. It's encouraged. We've made a lot of good connections that way. And the worst thing that happens is that somebody doesn't respond to you. That literally is the worst thing that can happen, is that they just don't answer your email. So I think it's a good exercise because one, that's also sort of like Mike said before, it's part of what PR is like, right? You're cold emailing journalists sometimes trying to, convince them of why your story is important. It's sort of the same thing. Not everyone lists their jobs online. So, going back to what I said before, if you've sort of narrowed down, I'd like to work at an agency that does tech. If you go and do a search, you could probably find, who the top 10 or 12 agencies are that do tech, including us. And then you can find their email and you can reach out to them directly.
Karen, I know we're getting short on time. I'm sorry. I know we're getting short on time. I have one question that somebody sent me in a chat, so I'm going to hold it until you're ready.
Okay, I just wanted to ask Michael, based off that question, how did you get your job with FischTank? Was it from you emailing Eric prior and talking with Matt, or did you actually see something on the website that kind of caught your?
Yeah. So originally, I spoke with Eric about a year before through a mutual connection. Someone I worked for prior knew Eric, and he knew that Eric was in the PR industry and knew I was obviously a PR grad. So I had a conversation with Eric, and they weren't hiring at the time. FischTank wasn't hiring at the time, but he kept me on file and kept me kind of in the loop. But then I had him on LinkedIn, which is obviously another great way to connect with people. And I saw Eric post a job on LinkedIn about a year later. I applied. I was able to interview with Matt, and then the interview went well, and I was hired. Which was it's a long lead time, but the persistence, like Matt said earlier on, and just staying in touch, staying in front of people, I think goes a long way.
The R in PR stands for relations, right? So that goes way more past media and companies and stuff. This is a relationships business, absolutely.
Definitely.
There was a question that came up in the chat, and actually, Matt, I don't know if you must have seen it, because this is a heck of a segue into this question. With the R in relationships being so evident in public relations, somebody put in the chat here to me privately, any comment on the future of the field when it seems, in a pandemic like this, or even just sometimes when we're all kind of self-indulge in our own technology, when it seems that interpersonal communication is lacking and it's kind of hard to foster sometimes, any thoughts on what a professional of tomorrow may need to do or brush up on or be prepared for as they enter the relationship business, when relationships are kind of in an interesting place right now?
Yeah, that's a great question. I know that things have changed where we're not out meeting reporters for coffee, right? Because you can't. But I have relationships with people and reporters that go back 4 or 5 years, and I've never met them in person or spoken to them on the phone. Literally the only thing we've ever done is email back and forth, right? But like, we were able to foster that because I built a trust for him, that I was connecting him with people and companies that were authorities, and they were real, and they were trying to offer real stories. So yes, it is definitely different, because nothing is better than like one-on-one, face-to-face, like even Zoom to me, like, is not the same as I would have loved to have been like sitting in front of you guys, like in a classroom or something, right? It's just better. But I think finding a way to still cut through a lot of the white noise that is digital communication, and build those trusting relationships with, whether it's reporters or other people in the PR or clients or companies, it's still important. And a lot of times it's just being genuine and just being like honest and not being slimy, which I know it sounds like simple stuff, but that's how you build trust with people. And that's how you get them to come back and want to work with you more. So it can be a number of ways. It can just be an email where you send over a note to someone and say, hey, I love this article you wrote yesterday. I work with a company that does this. I'd love to introduce you sometime. Let me know, right? Or maybe it's responding to a tweet that they put out where you're saying like, hey, great article, John. Like, what do you think about this, right? And just like starting a conversation organically to show them that you're a person and they're a person, and you're not just a PR person.
Yep. I agree. And to add on that too, I think every person, every journalist is different. So I think trying everything is always a good thing too. Try Twitter, try email, even some reporters are old school. I pitched a reporter, I think, this week, and she actually called me because she just wanted to, speak on the phone. And just being open to all those avenues, I think, will create more relationships and just understanding that everyone's different. And as long as you're genuine and you have a story, a legit story that you're telling, I think definitely goes a long way.
The method of communication may be different, but the baseline of what you're trying to achieve is the same.
Yep. That was well put.
Thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate that. That's a lot of good insight.
Cool.
No problem.
I think one thing I wanted to add from what we were discussing earlier, I know Matt mentioned it a few times, knowing like your clients and the industry you want to get into, I think that definitely helps. And it's definitely, I'd say FischTank, that's probably one of the hardest things, just learning new clients and trying to learn their industry. Obviously, we're not experts on every subject matter because our clients are, but to understand the information and what our clients do, it goes a long way with obviously communicating that to journalists, and it just makes your work easier as well. Because myself, I know Matt's a big sports guy. We have a few sports clients, and it's a breeze. It's a walk in the park. I could talk about it for days, but when we're talking about AI or medical equipment and stuff, sometimes that stuff is hard for me. But to put your all into it and understand it, I think it goes a long way. But I enjoy it too, because you have to want to enjoy learning about new things, learning about new industries. Otherwise, if you're going to a firm like FischTank, where there's clients in different industries, you're going to struggle if you're not enjoying kind of the growth and learning about new industries.
Thank you so much. That was great. No, that really explained everything. Just really doing the background research and digging a little bit more before you even start a project, and doing that extra research will really have you have more of a background on it before you get started. And going in with no knowledge on something, you can always learn more. Like if you don't know Hootsuite, you could always take a tutorial and teach yourself a lesson on LinkedIn, or even on Hootsuite, they have their own tutorials. So it's good to, you know, just jump in and take on different lessons. If you don't know something, you could always find a way to learn it. And now that everything's virtual, I feel like they have lessons for almost everything. So you can never be underqualified. If you want nowadays, you can kind of educate yourself in all different areas. But thank you guys so much. This was amazing. And I'm sorry we didn't get too many people. I know they have a lot of events going on during college hour, but I think it's really great that we recorded it and everyone else will be able to look back on it. And it was super informative and motivational and encouraging to, I'm sure, everybody that is here. So, and taking the time out of your day to speak with us has been incredible. Thank you guys so much.
Yeah, no problem. Happy to do it. You know, happy to do it any other time as well. You know, I think it's a positive thing for students to get to see like what somebody like Mike did, you know, because like he's sort of like the path that probably a lot of people want to try and take, and they want to, like the Gatorade commercial, they want to be like Mike. So, you know, I think he would be a great resource for people, also students there, if they have questions on certain things and how to find jobs and move forward. You know, to reach out to Mike, or you can obviously reach out to me also, or our contact information's on our website. Happy to be a resource.
Definitely connect with LinkedIn, and yeah, keep in touch, and happy to help out the old Kean fam.
And we would love to have you always guys come back. It's amazing to have. Before you guys go, can we take a picture? Can everyone turn on their cameras if they can, so we can post it on social media? Thank you guys so much, seriously, for taking the time. I know you guys have a lot going on, but we really appreciate